today's episode, I'm gonna show you how to make this alchemist kit with a unique caffeine twist. You're gonna wanna stick around for this one. Welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. Okay, so I may have gone a little bit overboard with this particular project. What had started with the thought of making kind of this cool, more of a prop alchemy kit, quickly transformed into this weird labor of love and science. I am beyond excited to show you how cool this thing is. To that point though, we have a whole lot of different things to get into right now, so let's just jump right into it. Though before we do, if at any point in time you like what's going on here, why don't you give me some of that thumbs up love, and don't forget to subscribe so you know when I release new content. Now this is normally where I'd say let's level up this skill, but I have no idea where this falls. We're gonna do a little bit of woodworking, some leather work, deal with pressure differentials. It's a weird episode. So we're just gonna call it a cool thing we're playing with, which is fine. It was a cool skill. So it kind of started the kernel of this idea were all of these cool bottles that I've collected over the years. This was basically the foundation of the project. I was cleaning up and I was like, these are a lot of bottles. I should do something with these. With this in mind, I also happened to pick up this little mortar and pestle here from an arcane shop in Salem on Halloween. It kind of has a cool ring to it. If you decide to build something like this, you can of course style it however you like. It could be an alchemist kit or an apothecary set or something for your Larp, whatever. Now to store all of these knickknacks, I bought this pine box from Michael's for like, I think it was around $15 or so. The construction is simple and kind of cheaply made, but honestly, we're gonna jazz this thing up. Wait till you see. To start jazzing this thing up, I decided to stain it this nice warm Carrington brown. It has this nice reddish undertone and makes it look more like a hardwood and kind of an older looking box. So this early on in the project is where it went off the rails. I have a problem and where I don't like making a prop for a prop's sake. Now making something just because it looks cool and to put on your wall or whatever is totally valid. I'm not talking down on that. But I just love when like form meets function, like when the thing you made also does something really cool. So I had that baking in my head when I just so happened to run across this damn thing. This is a siphon coffee brewer, sometimes called like a vacuum coffee brewer. Basically, it works by having two containers, one sealed with some water in it, which you pressurize via heat. That excess pressure forces that hot water into the other bottle where the coffee grounds are, where it'll brew. Then as that original bottle cools off, it causes a vacuum, which sucks all that brewed coffee back in, leaving the grounds in the other bottle. It is cool to watch and one of the most alchemy-looking things I've ever seen. So, with these two bottles armed and ready to go, I decided to make this thing happen with this kit. To that point though, I want this kit to be self-contained, like you can just set up shop and start brewing your thing. So I needed a way to have a heat source that would be reliable and could brew something quickly. Luckily, the internet is a thing, and I was able to find a way to make an alcohol burner out of a couple of cans. First, of course, I had to empty the cans. It's for science. I mean, it's for science. Actually. This is for science too. I am testing the alcohol dehydrogenate contents of my system. That is all. Okay, so to make my little burner, first I have to start by cutting out the very bottom of one of the cans. To do this, I just score around the ring at the bottom, and then carefully cut into the middle and pop out the aluminum at my score lines. Now, in order for this thing to work properly, you really want the little like distribution holes or whatever around the edge of it to be evenly spaced. To measure this out easily, I just wrap some masking tape around the bottom of the rim. Then I carefully cut a slit in that tape and took it back off, leaving me with a piece the exact circumference of my can. Now it's an easy task to just stick it onto the table and space out holes evenly by measuring that space in half, and then those spaces in half, and then those spaces in half. When all is said and done, it leaves me with 8 marks. Now with that all measured, I can just stick the tape back onto my can and drill a hole at each mark using a 1/16 of an inch drill bit. Now if you want to get this done and you don't happen to have a drill bit on you, you can actually use like a small nail or even a thumbtack will work. It's an aluminum can, they're not all that strong. And with all that prep work down, it's time to cut the cans down to size. Now the actual height that I use on these isn't really all that important. I mean, you can make them basically as small as this little rim here, or use like half the can. It really depends on how much fuel you're looking to put inside. Though I'm sure there'll be like an efficiency issue the taller it gets. Interesting experiment. Later. For mine though, I decided to make it about 2.5 inches tall so it'll fit in my box here. And to cut them, I found a really cool trick. By securing a razor blade to a board, roughly the height where you want it, you can then turn the can against the blade and score the aluminum. Once you've done that, all you have to do is press just underneath that line, and the can actually just pops apart right where you scored it. The line is clean and perfect. You don't have to deal with trying to cut into aluminum, which is always a pain in the ass. Using this trick, I cut my 2 cans at the same height. Also using that same height for measurement, I cut this strip of aluminum out of what was left over of one of my cans. So we're gonna use that to form like an inner chamber for distribution purposes of the fuel. All we have to do with it is roll it up so that it fits right into the little indent at the bottom of the can. And to keep it at that size, I just used a stapler and tacked it into place. Then I cut out 4 evenly spaced apart triangles at the very bottom of that cylinder, which is what's gonna help control the amount of fuel that's coming out of those little burner heads. Finally, to put all my pieces together, I went around the outside of the bottom part with some needle nose pliers and just crimped it all around the edge to make it a bit smaller. So with all those parts ready in that inner wall sitting in place, I just slid the top of it over the bottom, again making sure that inner wall is in place and fit into the raised rings on both the top and bottom of the can. I also went back in with some sandpaper to remove the paint and branding and make it look more like something you'd find in an alchemist kit. Gotta stay on theme, damn it. Finally, I cut the bottom out of another can just so I can have a little lid that I can put over my main opening. Alright, so here's how this works. First, I fill that main opening with some denatured alcohol. Then I light that sucker up. Already, there's a pretty decent flame in place, but we really want the flame to be coming out of those little burners. So what'll happen is, over time, the can is gonna heat up and it's gonna heat up the rest of the fuel. Once it starts to bubble, more of the gas is gonna come around those little inner walls, gonna leach through those little triangles and out of those holes. Once that happens, we're gonna see what's called a bloom, this little crown of flames. By putting a cap on the main flame, all the pressure is driven out to those little holes, making a really consistent, perfect little burner. Obviously, be careful because you've got like a pot of alcohol. If you spill it over, you will have a big fire. But this thing is so cool and so simple. And with it being like halfway full of fuel, I was able to get about 30 minutes worth of a burn. It's pretty impressive. Okay, so bam, fire, check, we have fire now. With it, we can heat up our bottles. That being said, I'm led to a different issue because I'm gonna be dealing with a hot bottle. I can't like hold it, and sure I could put it onto the can and the burner will heat it, but that's not really balanced very well. I don't know if I trust it. So to solve this problem, I found these little pipe hangers at Home Depot for like 75 cents a piece. They just so happen to fit perfectly around the neck of my bottle. And with a little light tweaking and bending, I was able to make it so it actually snapped into place just around the ring of the bottle, making a really secure fit. And for a little added convenience, I cut a piece of dowel at around 6 inches and drilled a hole into the top of it. Then using a razor blade, I cut out a little slit here, giving myself enough space to actually slide that hanger right inside. This makes a nice convenient little handle for me to use everything. I also manufactured this little shim out of a dowel just to make sure it stays locked into place. Okay, so you know when you're doing a project like this, when you wander around a craft store or a hardware store looking for things that you're not sure what you're looking for. You're trying to put it together in your head and just seeing what they have and coming up with ideas. About 4 hours deep into doing something like that on a Saturday night, I came up with this cool idea. Basically, I found this little copper bracket here used for holding pipes against the wall or whatever, and realized it fit around my dowel perfectly. I figure using this, I can actually mount my bottle to the lid itself while it's over the fire, kind of giving me this cool little swing action, and it becomes something I can kind of set up and walk away from and do some other things while my coffee brews, and it's really cool and I love it. It's the little things. All right, so we have the heat, we have a way to mount the bottles. Finally, we need a way to get the water from one bottle into the other one. To do this, I just busted out some 3/8 soft copper pipe. You could use anything that's kind of food safe and heat resistant. It doesn't have to be a pipe. It can be some like tubing or whatever. Have fun with it. To get it into the shape I wanted though, I started by pushing it down into the bottom of the bottle and then marking about 1.5 inches from the mouth. Then I used a tubing bender to give it a perfect 90. And if you are using soft copper, you can totally do this with your hands. You don't need a fancy bender or anything. I just love that really clean 90 look, and I have trouble doing that with my fingers without crimping it. Okay, so from there, I just measured 5 inches away from that bend and made another 90-degree bend. Then I cut off the excess copper at the appropriate distance so that when the bottle is mounted, it'll actually reach all the way down to the table. Basically, I want it to reach all the way to the bottom of the bottle so that when it's sitting down on the table surface, it gets all the liquid back it can. That's all set, but it does run me into a little bit of a different conundrum I had. So basically, that bottle that's getting heated up, it needs to be sealed because we need to build pressure inside of it. And of course, my pipe is too small to actually make a positive seal. Now, if you have access to like a rubber cork of some sort, food safe obviously, but no big deal. You can just drill a hole into the middle of it and whatever. In fact, they sell corks for labs and stuff that are specifically made for this kind of application. I didn't have one, and shipping says it would take like 2 weeks for me to get them. We are on a schedule, people. I have a weekend to do these projects. Luckily, Rockler Tool actually had these little silicone cork blanks. They're used for wood turning in case you want to make like a fancy cork to put onto a bottle. Turns out though, you can remove the wooden insert from it really easily. Then cutting a small hole, my pipe fits into it perfectly. Now, making sure the copper reached all the way down to my bottle with the cork in place, I marked on the pipe where that cork needed to sit. I guess it's not really a cork is made of cork, it's a stopper. So this is working fairly well, but there is a little bit of a gap between the silicone and the pipe. This of course makes it so we don't have a positive seal. To fix that though, all I had to do was take some 100% silicone and fill up that space. Once that cured though, I had a food safe silicone cork perfectly made for fitting around my pipe. And with that, all of the tricky engineering bits of making this into like a functional thing is done. That's figured out. Now, we've got the function down. Let's get into the form. Basically, let's make it pretty. So since the wood of this box is really kind of thin, and again, it's a cheap box, I didn't want to install like brackets and stuff with screws. One, the screw will probably just kind of pierce through the front of the thing. And if it's short enough to fit in there, it's gonna pull through. It's not a very strong lid. But, and I'm gonna preemptively give myself one of these here, I came up with a really good idea for this. What I did was cut out these panels of leather so that they fit exactly into the bottom and the top of my little case here. The thought is I can attach all of the straps and brackets and everything to the leather, and then attach the leather to the case using a contact adhesive. And I'm gonna spoil the surprise for you. This totally worked. It totally worked. It took me an embarrassingly long time to figure this out. I'm patting myself on the back, but it was an embarrassingly long time. But with that figured out, I went ahead and lined up all of my bottles and bowls and everything I wanted in there so that I knew where each bracket and strap might go. Then having figured out kind of the space and how everything should fit together, I cut a bunch of these 1/2-inch straps. I also cut out this specialized shape here that's designed to fit right over the head of the bottle and lock it into place. Another thing that took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out. I'm like, we're gonna move this box around and the bottles are gonna fly everywhere and break. It took me a little bit to come up with that. But with all those figured out and cut and prepared, I went ahead and dyed them a nice saddle tan. Then started placing the straps by laying down my bottle and looping it around to figure out where everything will go. After I put that first rivet in place, I simply continue the leather around the bottom and mark where the next spot needs to be with an awl. Then I lock it into place with a rivet as well. It's pretty much rinse and repeat from here, just locking all of my straps into place with rivets, using the bottles and bowls and cups as a form of measurement. I also connected those overhead bottle straps and added some simple snaps to them so that they can lock those bottles into place. In fact, I ended up locking most of the things in place with an extra little overhead snap the same way, just so it wouldn't jostle around as you're moving. But again, depending on what you're putting into the little box you decide to make, this is gonna vary. You might not even use the snaps. I was, however, very proud of this little wrap I put on the burner with the snaps on the side. This way it gets snapped in place on either side and is held really secure and just kind of looks clean. I thought it was neat. Anyways, with the bottom all set, I followed suit with the top panel, locking all of those bottles into place as well. I also made this cool little plaque with all of the recipe of things needed, fire, water, or some kind of plant, to make all of the various concoctions in this kit. And this is also one of my like insane moments where I don't understand how my partners work with me. So I call Middle Miss Red in the middle of the night, like, I need you to make me an alchemist symbol that contains the symbols for fire and water, and then the molecule for caffeine. And she's like, so you're telling me you want me to make a magic spell for making coffee? And I say, yes, yes I do. And look at what she comes up with. You know why I ask you a bunch of random shit like this? Because you pull out stuff like that. God, that's good. Even has a little moon, because you stay up all night afterwards. Ah, it's so clever. I'm clever. Anyways, using this, I was able to cut it out in a veneer with my Cricut printer. If you don't have a Cricut printer, you can totally pull this off with a razor knife and some very careful cuts. But honestly, look at how dope this thing came out. I'm so happy with it. I'm very impressed. Now I decided to paint this little beauty with a silver metallic paint to make it look a bit like a metal inlay on the top of the box. Once the paint was dry, I turned it over and dabbed the back with some wood glue. then carefully place it on top of my box and weight it down while it dried. After about an hour, the glue is completely dry and totally secure. And to add a little extra character to the outside of my box, I decided to wrap some straps around it, marking them off with a pencil so I can apply some contact cement. I use this to carefully stick them into place so that they wrapped all the way around the box, ending in these nifty little snaps to hold the whole thing shut. Just be sure if you do this, you leave some space where there's no glue at where the hinges go. You want there to be enough free movement there. You don't want to glue the whole thing shut by accident. Next, I applied some contact adhesive to the inside of my box, as well as those leather panels. Once they were tacky, I carefully positioned everything into place and pressed them down firmly to make sure the glue holds. And I am super jazzed with how well this worked out. It's strong, it holds into place, it's great. I did, however, notice an issue though. With just the extra weight of the leather, the lid actually started to lean back a little bit further than I was comfortable with. Then once I add the bottles and stuff, there was no way those hinges were gonna hold out. They're just cheap little hinges. To get around this problem though, all I had to do was take these little straps of leather and secure the top lid to the bottom lid using these upholstery tacks. This will stop it from opening any further than those little strips of leather will allow. I also realized that I'm gonna be like hanging a boiling thing of water. If it closed, I'm in trouble. To get around that, I just drilled a hole on the lid and the base and used this little stick to prop the whole thing open. And that was the final part of the build. From here, I stocked the whole thing, filling all my bottles and vials with coffee beans and tea and powdered creamer, chocolate, sugar, the whole 9 yards. I also made sure to supply myself with some coffee filters that I cut into quarters. I even hid some matches inside of the burner and mounted a little piece of striker board cut from a matchbox so that I can strike my matches right inside. Okay, and at this point, we're ready to test out the coffee making function. So I go ahead and bust out my burner, filling it up with my little bottle of fuel here. Then I strike a match and put it aside while it heats up. While it does, I bust out my coffee beans and use my little mortar and pestle to process them into a nice fine grind. Using one of my filters as a funnel, I put this grind into one of my bottles. From here, I take out my pipe and add my cork to one side and a filter to the other, held in place by a little O-ring. After my handle has been connected to the bottle of water and the whole assembly has been mounted onto the lid, I connect both bottles with my pipe. At this point, the burner is all ready to go and I slide it under the bottle to start the brewing process. And this is so cool. You can actually see as the water heats up and the pressure builds, that water starts to fill the other bottle. So what happens here is as things heat up, they take up more space. The molecules expand. In water's case, it makes steam. Because that takes up more space and that bottle is sealed, there's nowhere else to put that pressure except for through that pipe. So your water is being forced down, basically pushed down and going through your pipe. In fact, it goes through it so forcefully that I have a little bit of an explosive spill here. I gotta make a little cap for that or fill the bottle up less, I think. But here's the really cool part. After I've given that coffee a little bit of time to brew, I remove my burner and that first bottle starts to cool. As it starts to cool, the contents of that bottle takes up less space. It starts to contract. This causes a vacuum, which starts to suck that liquid back into the bottle. And because of our filter on the other side, it's only bringing back perfectly brewed, filtered coffee. From here, there's nothing left to do but grab my little cup, some creamer, some sugar, and fix myself a nice cup of alchemist coffee. I cannot explain at how amused I am by this thing. It works. It looks really cool. Everything is secure. It's not falling out anywhere. Look at it. It's so dope. I love this. And if you're in like a Larp or some kind of fantasy setting or whatever, like you can style something like this however you want. You can be making teas and tinctures on the side, playing with different herbs, doing whatever. It's so cool and it's such a fun project. I hope you enjoyed this half as much as I did because I really love this thing. If you did, please give me that thumbs up love and do subscribe so you know when I release new content. Now a gigantic thanks goes out to all of my Patreon members here. Without you guys, I wouldn't be able to do stuff that I honestly love doing things like this. So thank you so much for helping support this channel and helping me buy materials and just grow in general. If you'd like to support what I do here, consider joining my Patreon, links in the description below. And if there's anything special you'd like to see me cover, why don't you leave it down in the comment section below and I'll add it to the list. All right, I gotta go. I turned my brother into a suit of armor like years ago, and though this won't help, he does like coffee. In the meantime, though, keep leveling up, you. Thanks for sticking around to the end screen. As a special present just for you, I've curated 2 more episodes, but don't tell anybody. This will be our little secret. Go on, click on it. You've earned it. Whew, that stung. I wasn't paying attention.